All right. Hi, Gassan. Hi, Mary. Hi, Reem. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Vonvo.com for a discussion on the revolution inside of Syria. I just wanted to go over a few things today before we got started. The first is that today's February 24th, and I'm going to be recording this discussion. After the recording is complete, I'll be posting our conversation to YouTube. Is that okay with each of you?
It's fine.
It is with us.
Okay, great.
Yes.
And on top of that, here at Vonvo, we are all about our conversations staying both valuable and civil. And so we don't want there to be any personal attacks against anyone. Are you guys okay with those ground rules?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's get started then. Let's go ladies first. Reem, would you mind? And then Mary, and then Gassan. For our viewers listening in right now and who will watch this conversation, would you mind just giving a quick background of yourself and a quick explanation of why you are passionate about this subject?
Sure. My name's Reem Hariri Connor. I consider myself an activist, but I'm not a political person for sure. I started, caring about what's happening in Syria since I'm Syrian. I'm living currently in the United States, but I grew up in Syria. I came here a few years ago to get my higher education. I'm originally from Daraa, so this means a lot for me because the revolution started in Daraa, southern of Syria. I'm involved in every single activist organization here in the state. Very few of my family members were detained, and one of them is still in detention. So this brings it closer to home for me, and I feel the need to speak about it and raise awareness and help as much as I can.
Great. And Mary?
My name is Mary Rizzo. My name is Mary Rizzo. I live in Italy, and I've been an activist mostly for the Palestinian cause for a long time, and being involved in that cause has brought me also to be very involved in almost all the other liberation causes around the world, but most particularly the ones in the Arab world. And the Syrian situation, I think, is one of the most important situations for any human being that values their own freedom. So part of my activism, I do things like blogs and translation, and I organize and have different things going on to help raise funds and raise awareness and assist with convoys and what have you. But one of the things that I am very interested in is actually getting people to be aware of what is really going on. And I find that my past experience of being involved in the alternative media gives me kind of a bit of an insight as to how this issue is presented, and this is my approach is basically on how the alternative kind of society and the alternative media approaches.
Great. And finally, Gassan.
Oh, hi, I'm Ghassan. I'm from Lebanon, and I am pretty much perhaps in the same situation as Reem. In other words, I'm not a formal activist as such. I'm not a politician, definitely. But I am involved because the situation in Lebanon, in the Levant in general, affects my life, whether I like it or not, and it has been affecting my life since day one. And I just want to make a little comment here that Mary referred to the Palestinian cause, and then she referred to what's happening in Syria. And this is one of the greatest misconceptions about this whole situation, because what's happening in Syria and the Palestinian cause are totally and utterly unseparable. If one knows the true geopolitics of the region and the history of the region, one should know and understand that this whole Levant is initially referred to either as Syria, Greater Syria, or the Levant, or some people give it a geographical name, the Fertile Crescent. And those little nations, states, that emerged later on in the name of today's Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, are in fact states that have been created by the colonialists, by the British and the French, to be quite specific. They drew these lines, they drew those maps, and it was not the will of the people. There was no consensus, nothing democratic, no democratic process involved, definitely no referendum. And they called it, this is the state of Palestine, this is the state of Lebanon, this is the state of Syria, this is the state of Jordan. And then they took that part of our Syria, which we refer to as Palestine, and literally gave it to the state of Israel and called it Israel. So to talk about a Palestinian cause and a Syrian cause, truly, with all due respect, Mary, but it is a reflection of inadequate or insufficient information about the history of that region, because there is no such thing as a Palestinian cause that is separated from a greater Syrian cause. That's one comment. The second comment is that Mary said that she's involved in all of liberation movements. You see, the thing, Max, is that the moment people hear the term, or some people at least, the moment the people hear the term dictator, liberation, revolution, they get this kind of a hype. You know, they go on a high and they say, yes, this is a dictator, let's get rid of him. There's no such thing. In Syria, the situation is far from that. This is only the facade that is attracting sympathizers who have very little knowledge, like Mary, with all due respect. This is not a personal attack, Mary, please. People who are well-intentioned. I have no
about me.
Right.
I have no doubt that Mary is well-intentioned. I have no doubt. And I honestly have great respect for her. So please keep that in mind. And my objective, Mary, is to win you on our side and not to fight you. You are not an enemy.
I don't think that will happen.
Right, so...
Well, I will try. And of course my objective is to win Reem, especially that she's a Syrian citizen. I think I've said enough as an introduction.
Right, so, I mean, Mary, you can feel free to respond to what Ghassan just had to say, and then, you know, let's direct the question,
Sure.
you know, the questions right around Syria and figure out how to get through this mess.
He's absolutely...
Go ahead.
Okay, he's absolutely correct that the lines were drawn without the consent of the people that were living there. And this is 100% true. There was, you know, everyone knows it. It's not anything, you know, to debate about. Everyone also knows that he talks about the activism as if, you know, there's the Syrian activism and the Palestinian activism. It's different things. And I said, no, the fact that I've been involved for so long with Palestinian activism has made it a natural progression. I would be involved in any kind of liberation struggle. And obviously, the Syrian situation, just like many other situations in the Arab Spring that a lot of people would try to deny, is an autonomous movement of the people in their own lands, not some kind of thing brought down towards them and with instructions from above on what to do. That all of this is really a history of people wanting to be free. The demand and the need for freedom is not confined to only the Palestinian question. So if people are seeing what's going on in Syria and saying, well, it's not really the same as like the Palestinian issue, which is the issue above and beyond all other liberation struggles. This, I believe, is like any other liberation struggle, and the amount of victims, the amount of suffering that's going on right now, it makes it actually an emergency much more than what is actually going on at this moment in Palestine.
Right. So, Reem, go ahead. Do you see any parallels between the two? And you lived in Syria, so why don't you kind of ease our way into this discussion about what you think is going on there?
Sure. Just 2 points. I mean, I've followed what Mary writes on her blogs, and I think she understands the conflict, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, very well. She explained herself. I'm not going to repeat what she said, but I agree with Mary on the comparison. No one is comparing Israel to Assad, although they are as brutal as him. I'm not saying he's better or worse. I'm just saying that the situation is different, but the oppression has no nationality. So if a father oppressing his son, or a dictator oppressing his people, or an occupation like in Israel case oppressing the Palestinian, it's the same to me. Why is it any different? People are going against inequality. So if there is a situation where people are not equal, there is an oppression and there is a situation to address. The second point is, Ghassan mentioned, people when they hear revolution, dictator, those are like, golden words and they get hyped about it. But what is the definition of a dictator? If Assad came to power by, changing the constitution in 15 minutes, he came to power because his dad was in power for 30 years, because his ruling family pretty much control every major position in Syria. I don't know what else to call it besides dictatorship or a mafia, if you want to say that. I don't know. I really don't know what to call it. I don't want to use the word dictatorship because it has, an echo for people. What else would you call that then? So these are the only 2 points I, would like to mention that Ghassan brought up. But other than that, if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer.
Right. And Ghassan, do you want to respond to either of the ladies' remarks?
Certainly do. Certainly, most certainly. Look, I'm going to respond to both ladies. They're not in the same order of the way they mention things, but as the discussion progresses. I'm first going to make a comment about the parallelism that both ladies have drawn between the Palestinian cause and, vis-a-vis the situation in, let's say, with Israel as a state, and comparing it to the so-called Assad regime. And one of the biggest mistakes, Reem, with all due respect, is that you have perhaps fallen victim to the Western media that is trying to, number one, create in people's minds that there is no difference between the so-called oppression of Assad regime and the oppression of the Israeli state to the Palestinians. They're both the same. And that's phase one. Because the moment you see people of your own ilk, people of your own nationality, a government of your own country, in the same regard, in the same view as you regard the government of an oppressive state that has stolen the land from your people, then you have committed a major strategic, national, logical, and patriotic mistake. That's a great mistake, a huge mistake. No matter how bad Assad can get, and I'm not saying that he is, there is no way that you should allow yourself to compare him to the state of Israel and to the oppression that the state of Israel is doing against the Palestinian people. And oppression leads us later on to the question of liberation. Mary is comparing the situation in Palestine to the situation with Syria. And of course, I agree with Mary that the situation in Syria has now to take the center stage. There is absolutely no doubt, because this is where the real battle is fought. Because also, in Palestine, you have a lot of conflict between Palestinians themselves and their strategies, and that's why they are divided to at least two major groups. Many of them have lost their way. They don't know exactly what to do. And look, this is not the subject. I can really talk a lot and a lot and a lot about Palestine and how many Palestinians have gone the wrong way in their political views and aspirations. And unfortunately, this is not the time to talk about it. But
Right.
if we just talk about this concept of liberation, people want to be liberated. Absolutely, I agree with you, Mary. But what people in Syria want to be liberated from is not a government that is so-called in the West as the Assad government. What they want to be liberated of is the West. They want the West to leave them alone. This is the liberation they seek. They do not seek any other liberation. And any other attempt to derail this attribute, to derail this kind of mentality, is in fact an attempt to try to divert the course and to take the battle somewhere else. What is happening now in Syria is not about regime change. It's not about liberation. It is about a vicious attack that Syria is subjected to by NATO, of course, headed by the United States, and by some Arab states that have other political concerns, by Turkey that has geopolitical aspirations, and all because Syria is the only nation, I repeat this in every interview, Syria is the only state left in the Arab world that is standing up against the Israeli plot that will secure total and utter Israeli hegemony to the region.
Right. So,
This whole thing is about securing the future of Israel. And let's not forget that about 20 years ago, America had a plan to occupy and subdue 7 nations. They've already occupied and subdued Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. And Syria is on that list. They have been preparing for this for decades. And if anyone thinks that America, NATO, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey are interested in the freedom and liberty of the Syrian people, he or she would have to have a second look at the history of these nations and their own practice, their own records, their own agenda. Enough said for now.
right. Go ahead, Mary, and then Reem, you can respond after. Do you guys agree with what
Sure.
Ghassan is saying?
Well, I think that what Hassan was saying is he utilizes a good deal of what is called gatekeeping, saying you cannot compare this and that. When actually, I wasn't even comparing. I was in my introduction stating that what brought me to the Syrian struggle was my 30-plus year history, actually 33 years, of doing activism on the ground and in internet, when internet started, for the Palestinian cause, that it was a natural progression for myself. So I wasn't even talking about Israel. But if we want to talk about Israel and Syria, well, why don't we talk about the Golan? Syria was supposed to have defended its own territory from being occupied by Israel, and it in fact invested millions in weapons. Some of these weapons were the weapons that the other day had been sent upon Aleppo, the Scud ballistic thermal missiles, which are gigantic missiles that go in a short territory. So they were bought ostensibly to be utilized to liberate the Golan, but they'd never been utilized in Israel, and there has never been any kind of attempt in any way to in some way challenge Israel and take back to Syria its own control over the region that had been occupied by Israel. So for one person to go on and on about all of this kind of, they're the only nation, it just seems to me a contradiction of reality, and actually what we see, what weapons are being used are not weapons by the United States. What has been dropped upon Aleppo in the past week has been, I think, 40 different Scud missiles that have had, I don't know how much destruction, but all you have to do is look on video, or YouTube, anywhere you want, you'll see a kind of destruction that you can only see from the most aggressive kind of warfare, and this was not aimed against military targets, but aimed against civilian areas outside of Aleppo. So all of this, the West and Israel and all of this kind of stuff is there to kind of, create a static so that we stop looking at what the real issue is. And one of the other things that Hassan had mentioned, and then I'll let Reem respond to the rest of what he said, but he was talking about the composition more or less of the state. The state has comparing it, at first it had been broken down into these other little things, and it's all actually we're one people. And I do agree that the Pan-Arabism was a good idea. I don't know if it's still practicable, but it was an all right idea while it lasted, and it was in fact invented by a Syrian way back. A Syrian that actually was kicked out by Hafez. But let's, we're in the same Ba'ath party, by the way. But one of the points is he's talking about this kind of the state being, the people, want this state that stands up against the West and all of this stuff. But it seems kind of an insane example of a state leader, because as I said last week, and we had a debate that had gotten broken off, but one of the points was the definition of a state is basically one that a lot of people go by, is the one kind of force that claims that it has the monopoly on the use of violence, and they don't let any other kind of group have this monopoly, not just to be able to also utilize violence, but monopoly. That means they're going to, of course, crush down any kind of rebellion, any kind of uprising, any kind of intifada, any kind of revolution. So in order to propose this kind of monopoly, keep the monopoly, the model of state that this leader has had to keep has been a very authoritarian model. So anytime you have an authoritarian state, personal liberty, individual liberty is going to go out the window. You're not, it's not going to be just they touch you down at the airport or make you take your shoes off. You're not going to have any kind of personal liberty. It's going to go all the way. So no, if there's this kind of terror of the awful, evil, anti-democratic West, I don't know. I mean, I think it would be kind of interesting to see just exactly why an authoritarian regime with a strict father kind of figure that's controlling everything, he can keep his best interests in mind at all. He destroys his own assets, the territory, the population, right, the infrastructure, the wealth. It's bizarre that Hassan is going to point forward that all of these people are protesting the West. I mean, to me, this seems, a part of being this kind of his attempt to gatekeep. It just seems kind of delirium. That's my own.
Right,
idea.
Right. And Reem, go ahead.
I mean, Ghassan mentioned a few points. I'm not going to go back to the Palestinian-Israeli issue because we can go for days talking about that. However, I would like to mention one thing. Ghassan mentioned that the country, this whole conspiracy against Syria because the country is actually standing up for Israel. I would like to remind him back in 2006 when the Lebanese were misplaced and because of the war with Israel. Actually, the people of Syria, opened their doors to the people of Lebanon. So the notion that the country is actually standing up, it's really not correct. And like Mary said, they could have gotten Golan Heights way, 40 years ago if they wanted really. This is just a game. This is just a card they play against the Israeli. So they have the support of Hezbollah if they need it. So, we help you, so you have to help us. It's all politics. But it's actually all the sanction, it's against the people. When Assad or his family wants to travel, no one stands in line and be treated like a terrorist. I'm the one who, if I go stand in line, if I'm traveling, they look at my passport in Syrian and they accuse me that I'm supporting, terrorism. But Bashar doesn't care about the sanction. The people are the suffering for the stand that they take against Israel. It's not the government. It's not the country. That's what I would like to say about the Israel issue. And then Assad mentioned something about, the West media. I mean, I grew up in Syria, and I grew up not to believe the West media. Not only the West media, I grew up not to believe the media in general. And I'm not too naive to just, take in what the media, especially the West media, is telling me. But if you want to talk about the conspiracy, I'm going to go there with you. I'm going to say the whole world is really against Syria and wants Syria as a state because it's a great state to fail. Why did the regime react that way? If the regime is smart enough to know that actually there is a conspiracy, there is a plan to bring down the country, why did they react the way they reacted when, a few kids in Daraa wrote slogan on the wall in their school? Why did they take them, detain them, torture them? And this is not stories from, I know these kids, and I've mentioned this on many, discussions. I know these kids. I can give you the names. You can go check for yourself if you go to Daraa. They took them, they detained them. The older kid was 16 years old, tortured them, So if really the regime is smart and he knows there is a conspiracy, why didn't they resolve the issue? The people, if you remember, Hassan, and, if you're in Lebanon, you know what's happening. The people started, demanding freedom. First, they actually demanded that these kids to be released. And they were, I think that was in March 17, 2011, the first protest. It was only 200 people. They went down to Damascus and they demanded that those kids be released. The reaction of the police was ridiculous. I mean, the lack of leadership that, the Assad regime showed in the beginning of the revolution, it's really what brought it to the point that it is right now. So the notion that this whole conspiracy, and if it was correct, why did the Assad actually react that way? People really, in the beginning, and I was one of those naive people who actually thought Assad could be different than his father, and we were okay. We were not too happy with the way he came into power, but we were okay with him. But for him to actually react the way he reacted, he just continued the whole, Secret Service mukhabarat way of treating the people, and that's really what brought people over the edge. It's
right.
You already have people who were obsessed for 40 years. On top of this, old Arab Spring happening, I mean, how could you not expect this to happen? How could you blame it on a conspiracy after all this?
Right. And so, Ghassan, I want you to respond, but I was just going to ask you if you could just also respond to this question, which would be, do you think that, the examples that Reem's bringing up of the treatment of, those students in the beginning of this conflict, was the right approach to take, and his treatment of the Syrian people has been, justified? And go ahead.
Well, to begin with, Max, when basically you have three people debating each other, and two are on one side, and the third person is on the other side, and each of the two that are on one side want to give very, very long and elaborate responses and talk about many, many different aspects, it makes it extremely difficult for me to answer. Very difficult. And if you want to handle this debate on a fair and equitable manner, then it should be one of them, me, and then the other one, me. Otherwise, I'm not getting, or my side of the story is not getting its enough airtime and representation. Right. And it will also allow me to respond to the points they are making one by one, because their replies were so diverse. And then what added insult to injury, sorry, Max, was your question later on. But let me wrap it all up in a neat little bundle. Very neat little bundle. Okay. The card that is actually played about Assad, you are quite right, Mary, is in relation, Andre, is in relation to the Golan front. If Assad wanted to do anything against Israel, he should have had a conventional war on the Golan front. Now, any person with the least understanding of the geopolitics of the area should realize and understand that it would be virtually impossible for Syria to win a ground battle with Israel, because Israel is technologically advanced And Israel is actually an extension of NATO in the region, and it's got all the strategic support it can get, all the logistic support it can get from the United States, all the espionage, all the information, and it would be next to impossible for Syria to win an actual field battle with Israel on the Golan front. But Hafez was a very, very shrewd, very intelligent man. And this is why he decided that since we cannot fight the Israelis there, let's give them hell somewhere else. And that's not by his choice. It's by the way the geopolitics have actually dictated themselves. I used to live in Lebanon. I still do. But at that time, that particular time, because I've been in and out on a number of occasions, but I used to be there, I was there in Beirut during the Israeli invasion. And I was there when our president, Amin Gemayel, was more or less coerced into doing peace talks with Israel. And he was just about to ratify this agreement, but he didn't, in fear for his own safety, really. And Lebanon at that time was in such case that the Israeli forces were just at its doorstep of the capital Beirut. They withdrew from Beirut and they retreated to Khalda, which is a southern suburb of Beirut. It's still within Beirut, but they only retreated from the area from where the government was. So Lebanon was virtually under Israeli occupation. We had the Sixth Fleet vessels in the Mediterranean. The PLO was out. Lebanon was down to its knees, absolutely down to its knees. There was absolutely no chance, no opportunity at all for Lebanon to be able to get rid of Israel. And then from the ashes rose the Lebanese resistance. From the ashes. And in no time, Israel was suffering severe and very, very heavy casualties, which eventually led to its expulsion. They called it, at that time, Ehud Barak called it a strategic retreat. He did not want to call it a humiliating defeat. This is indeed what it was, a defeat. Israel has never, ever been defeated in a war before. And Israel has never given back Arab land without a trade-off. It just was kicked out of Lebanon without any trade-off. And this would have never happened. And any person who does not know and acknowledge that this would have never happened without the support of the Syrian government, logistic, military, in any way you name it, is either an uninformed person from that region, who comes from that region, somebody who's perhaps following a different line of politics, or if he is an outsider, then he would be nothing but a pontificating meddler who's very, very informed, who's trying to tell us what our history is. And Mary, if you are not aware of the fact that Hezbollah would not have been able to kick Israel's backside, and if Hamas was not able to stand up and defend Gaza without the support of the Syrian government, then you know nothing about the history of the region, absolutely nothing. And you will be the first one to be, in this regard, classified as a social do-gooder, as a Western social do-gooder, as a new colonialist. Coming to tell us what our history is, neo-colonialist. You heard me.
Capisco una parola di quella che dice.
And read. Neo-colonialist. Okay? A colonial. You represent this mentality that is coming now to us. Mary, I don't interrupt anyone, and I do not appreciate being interrupted.
I asked you to repeat the word I did not understand. Could you?
Okay. I did repeat it. I repeated 7 times.
I didn't hear it. Could you repeat it or write it down so I can read it? I can't understand it.
I'll repeat it. Maybe it's my accent. This is a colonial mentality. What you are representing. Okay. You are really representing a colonial. I was about to say a slightly different word. Anyway, I make the point clear. And Reem, of course, when you talk about the Syrian people opening up their houses for the Lebanese, of course I understand that. Because I was one of them, where I had to leave home and go to Syria. And when I talk about Syria, I'm talking about its people and its government working together side by side as they always have. And just yesterday I was online and I realized that there is something to the tune of just in the environs of Latakia alone, 7,000 civilians who are basically reservists have signed up for I'm not sure that they call this army, but it is an army of volunteers that have come together in order to back up and support the regular army. The people of Syria who are aware of the facts, aware of the history, even though they have criticisms against Assad, they are standing up behind them. And yes, sure, Mary, we have always, I have debated you here on this forum before, and I'm not sure if you have been here before, but I have always conceded that there is corruption in Syria. There is no doubt. There is cronyism, there's corruption, there's a lot of need for reform, and a lot of it was not addressed quickly enough. But this does not mean that we allow this situation to give the West, to give NATO in particular, an opportunity to come back and meddle with our affairs. Because this is all they are after. Open up your eyes, Reem, and look at the bigger picture. The bigger picture here is about the integrity, the sovereignty, and the freedom of Syria. It's not about Bashar. It's not about liberation. It's not about democracy. These are all frills, facade attractions to attract people, and specifically people not only locally but also in the international scene, who will take this and run with it.
Right.
And again say, hey, dictator, let's go cut off his head. This is not what it's all about, not at all.
Okay.
And Max, please let's.
I'll go.
Let's try to make this
I'll go with that format that you recommended, but I'm gonna also then try and keep responses to a decent I don't know, a few minute time limit. But go ahead, Mary, and then Ghassan, you can respond to whatever Mary says, and then Reem will go back and forth. Go ahead.
Okay. He hadn't responded to a single argument that I brought up. He says it's the West and the West and the West. And I pointed out that we've got these Scud missiles from Russia that have been bombing the living daylights out of the Syrians. It seems he hasn't, he's talking a lot about, what happened here and there. Of course, omitting.
Mary, I'm going to have to interrupt you here.
No,
I'm sorry.
You can't interrupt me because you throw away a gasket when I interrupt you, and
Ghassan, let her
No,
finish.
the
Let her
reason
finish
I
her
need
point.
to interrupt you is because so many things have been raised by both you and Reem, and then Max on top of it asked me a question, and it's impossible for me to respond to 100 issues at the same time.
Okay,
Right,
then
but I will
you
get back
didn't
to this
respond to
later
one.
Ghassan, I said after she's
you
done.
went into your own.
After she's done speaking,
You went
then
in-
you'll respond to her, and then Reem won't speak until after you're done speaking. Go ahead, Mary.
Well,
Okay,
I think every single person should have the same amount of time.
Yeah,
This is my point of view.
Yeah,
I don't know,
Go.
why Hassan believes he has to have double time, but let's just, leave it at that. The point that I want to make is I think there's a lot of heavy-duty gatekeeping that Hassan is engaged in, going on and on about, stuff, rather than answering the questions that we've presented. Reem has asked about what would have been normal, of a normal kind of leader to have done in this situation at the beginning of the uprising, and he's ignored that. He's ignored, he's going on and on about the West without presenting, anything but some kind of theory about, the West and the Syrians hate the West, and Syria has been against, all this stuff. So of course you have to support the leader of Syria, because Syria said we did all this, but they couldn't go into the Golan because it wouldn't have worked and all this stuff. But let me just, and of course, he's always omitting, the kind of nasty things that Syria has done. For example, the crushing of the rebellion of the PLO in the Battle of Tel Zatar. I'm sure, he's aware of that. you know, and just crushing the entire left in the refugee camps of Lebanon. You know, that was Syria that did that. So it's, you know, I mean, there's, you know, I'm kind of tired of all this kind of, you know, putting all the ideological stuff to kind of, you know, clutter up the discourse so that we ignore that there's a genocide going on. We ignore that the people have risen up because they're sick and tired of being oppressed, not because they have some kind of problem with the West. I mean, the whole thing just seems ridiculous to me. I think if anybody has got, you know, access to internet, they can do a little bit of look in their own, instead of, you know, just believing some kind of lies, you know. And then another thing, in some way insist that I am a colonialist, and that Reem is, I don't know what he called her, but some, you know, I mean, I thought we were supposed to be here and not kind of, you know, offend other people, because obviously it's extremely offensive to call a person neo-colonialist when they haven't presented even one single argument in favor of any kind of outside domination. I want Syria to be for the Syrian people.
Right.
And I believe that every people has a right to demand and to fight for their own liberty. And you know, so I don't believe that they have to be pushed. They have to maintain some kind of system just because people from the outside, from Lebanon or wherever, or from Italy or from Iran or Russia or United, think something will be more, you know, better for them than their own desire to shake off their chains.
Right. Okay, Ghassan, so respond, and I'm kind of like just keeping a semi-timer. I mean, we'll go like 2-3 minutes, and then I'll kind of just raise my hand so that people know. Go ahead, Ghassan, respond, and then Reem, you'll go right after.
Mary, I didn't want to ignore any of the points you raised. But as I said before, there were so many issues raised. And the main point I was making about the Golan and that front, you know, being silent for many years, it's because both of you ladies have mentioned it, and it's a very, very important issue. And unless we talk about this in order to highlight the other battles that have in fact been fought and won by Syria, then we cannot really answer that question. And I'm not going to address a specific incident that either Reem mentioned about what happened in Dara, or what you mentioned about what happened in Aleppo recently. Because many of the incidents that happen here and there have two sides of the story. And I have seen many other stories, which I'm not really going to waste the time here, that would exactly expose the other side, how they're abducting women and taking them as sex slaves, how they are basically ransacking churches, kidnapping Christians, how they are forcing, forcing some Christian civilians in some areas to pay tax, how they are spreading leaflets in their areas under their control, asking women to wear the hijab and preventing them from driving, how in fact many stories that have been attributed to the Syrian army were later on exposed to be shown to have been in fact done by the FSA and their supporters. So any of those little stories that you want to mention has another story, another side to it, or many other stories that would expose the ugliness of the other side. And this is why I stick to the main issue here. And the main issue is about the sovereignty of the Levant. This is the main issue. And you are going away from it. You are the one who is evading the main issue, not me, Mary.
All right, Ghassan, let's have Reem come on in. And yeah, I'm going with 2 minutes. And Reem, you could get a little bit more because we haven't heard from you. So go ahead.
Sure. Ghassan mentioned a few points. I honestly couldn't keep track of everything, but you know, he goes back and forth to the resistant. I was fed the resistance since I was born. So don't tell me to, I mean, with all the respect, you can tell me whatever, but I know what the resistance is. I lived the resistance, and I was okay with it, and I'm still okay with it. And Palestine will always be on our mind and in our hearts, and I will never, dismiss that case. But that doesn't mean I would agree that I would be oppressed because of that resistance. So, the Assad regime, since they came in power, that was their excuse to actually do anything in the country, because we're under pressure, the emergency laws, and, if anything, Israel is going to come and, attack us if we're not united. So they were able to do anything they want in the country, pretty much hijack the country because of the resistance. So, at some point, you have to give in to those people too. The resistance does not mean I agree that, my woman, my friends be raped. The resistance does not mean I would agree that my cousin be detained and tortured. The resistance doesn't mean that, our amazing artists being, tortured and they're attacked in the streets. I mean, it just, the example goes on. And then you talked about, I think this is another point I want to discuss. You talked about how now it's like, talking about stories, and if I bring the story, about torture or whatever, you have other stories about Christian being attacked or whatever. And you're probably talking about now, what's happening. Now, I agree with you. The country is a mess because Assad did promise with this. He said it's either me or the country's going to burn down. And he actually delivered his promise. This is what his regime was saying. And they delivered that. They said if you do not stop the revolution, the country will be a mess. And they actually contributed to that. It is a mess right now. And of course, there is a lot of thugs in the revolution. I'm not defending, everyone in the revolution. But my point, which is very important because people have short memory, is to remember how did it start and why did they react that way. It started completely peaceful. And if you have any examples and you can prove it, I will be happy to discuss it with you. The first 6 months, actually, Assad came on TV and said the first 6 months it was peaceful, and then armed were, brought into the country. He did actually prove that the revolution started peaceful, and the regime actually was hoping it will turn to armed gang because that would be a great excuse for them and for the international community. Is like we're just fighting armed gang. Now, yeah, there are plenty of mistakes in the revolution, but you cannot compare the systematic killing that the Assad regime is doing by, individual reactions. A family who lost a beloved one, and they went in the street and they killed everyone they saw. Right. This is just not a true comparison. You can't say this is happening, and that's why we have to accept Assad as a leader.
Right. Go ahead, Ghassan.
Look, I agree with a lot of the things you said, Reem. And basically, I have also said before that the security apparatus in Syria has had many innocent victims. And this is indeed very, very sad. And there is no justification for it. And this is one of the first things that should have been addressed by Bashar, in his reform program, which wasn't really quick enough. And you are also quite right that the revolution, so-called revolution, started peacefully. But if you want to be accurate in describing the government response to that, the police were sent to Dara carrying batons only. They were not allowed to carry guns, just in case one of them felt trigger happy and wanted to shoot anyone. And it was peaceful for many, many weeks until the meddlers with their snipers went on building tops and started shooting at civilians and at army personnel just to create a conflict. The whole idea was to drag Syria into a war and to make it look like a civil war. And yes, there is oppression. But look at the situation now. It's only 60% of the parliament that is actually represented by the Ba'ath Party. And this is a great improvement if compared to 40 years ago, when 100% of the parliament was controlled by the Ba'ath Party. Surely you must realize that there has been reform. As a Syrian, you would know. Mary would not know. As a Syrian, you would know that there's been a lot of political freedom. There's been a lot of changes that have happened in Syria. A lot of opening up to the West, opening up things like import, export, allowing the internet, allowing even things like mobile phones that the father did not allow. There's a lot of changes, but you cannot go from one extreme to another overnight. All of these reforms have been on the agenda of Bashar, and they have been implemented slowly and gradually. The thing that I personally blame him for is not addressing corruption quickly enough. And that has raised a lot of, I agree with you. But again, Reem, we have to focus at the main picture here. The heart is bleeding. We have to focus at fixing our heart before we worry about little issues of reform.
Go ahead, Mary.
What's the question?
Well, no, if you had a response, otherwise I can ask a question if you guys want to take the
ask a question. Yeah, so it's useless to hope to get an answer from Hassan about the Scud missiles, about Assad using all of his weaponry against his own people. I'm not getting any kind of answers about that, about the destruction of any kind of all the civilians and the gigantic refugee problem. So question.
So Mary, I'll ask you a question about
Well, can I respond here, Matt?
No,
Well, Ghassan, I'd rather just since I think the discussion has gone in a circle a little bit. Let me bring up a new topic and have us address a different topic. The idea behind the different rebels from various countries inside of Syria right now. There's a lot of articles that come out, stating that there are many rebels inside of Syria that have no business even being inside of Syria, but they're there just fighting for the hell of it. It seems, and like they're being sent in from other countries. And so, Mary, I wanted to ask you, is that doing more or less harm to any sort of conclusion taking place inside of Syria? And I mean, what's your overall take on the rebel situation and against Assad or for Assad? Can you go into that, please?
Okay, I'm not a specialist on the number of rebels and the number of people that have come from other countries. You get some kind of information, then you get another kind of information. If you only listen to Sana and the Syrian media and the so-called anti-imperialist media, which actually has become more Islamophobic than anything I've ever seen in a long, long time. It's starting to read just like exactly a spreadsheet from a meeting of any kind of neocon think tank, with their absolute hatred of any kind of Islamic political movements. So I think a lot of that, they might give numbers, and I'm sure their numbers are exaggerated. Whereas on the other hand, when you see the actual kind of battles that are happening, you see a massively underarmed rebel, let's call them rebel side, opposition. I prefer to call them opposition because they're in opposition and they're not always working together. They're grossly underarmed to have to deal with beating down something that has things like the Scud missiles and the Air Force and the bombs that are being dropped in aerial raids, and the phosphorus bombs and the thermobarbaric bombs and all of it. The list goes on and on. The kind of weaponry that the regime is capable of using it far outweighs anything that the opposition is able to use. So if we're talking about numbers and the people being there, I don't have the information to make a suitable kind of
That's okay.
assessment on it. I just don't know.
That's fine.
I can just say, though, I do know that what the regime is using is totally disproportional to the kind of targets. They're bombing mostly civilian targets. You can't use that kind of force against civilians, and you can't use it inside your own country if you're any kind of normal country.
Right. Go ahead, Ghassan.
Look, thank you for saying, Mary, that you don't have enough information about that particular subject, and I honestly wish that you would concede that you don't have enough information about the other subject you have been discussing. And you have been repeatedly saying, and I can see the comment here, that I'm evading answering your questions. I'm not evading answering any of your questions. You are bringing up little details. They may not be little in their magnitude, but you are bringing up details of things like the Scud missiles, or now I hear you talk about phosphorus bombs, and I don't know what else you're going to bring up. And you conveniently ignore. Look, I don't have information about the use of these weapons. I've just heard it from you now.
You have to look on internet. You have internet. It's all over internet.
Do not interrupt. Do not interrupt.
Go,
Okay?
Ghassan, come on.
The Syrian army is entitled, and it does not need your approval, Mary Rita. It does not need your approval to decide what weapons in its possession it can use or not use in order to be quiet. Allow me to speak. This is a civilized
using them against
conversation.
the side. The defense.
Right.
Mary, you have
an enemy.
to speak.
Guys,
You accuse me of not answering your questions, and the moment I start to answer them, you interrupt me very rudely. So behave yourself. Behave yourself. Be civil.
Madonna. Calm down, Hassan. Try and calm down.
Ghassan, finish your point.
No. You try to concede that you are losing the argument, and this is why you have to interrupt me. Allow me to speak. So, those weapons. Max, will you please keep order in this discussion?
I am, but the more you keep going back and forth, it's the more wasted time that we're trying to go with this timer. So that's why
I'm being interrupted. I'm not doing this deliberately. I'm being interrupted, and I need my 2 minutes starting now because I haven't been able to say a word yet. Not a word, thanks to Mary.
Okay, Ghassan.
Okay.
Yeah, Ghassan.
So the point here is the army is entitled to use whatever means it has got in order to be able to achieve its strategic and military victories. And Mary is conveniently, very, very conveniently, ignoring the fact that all of those huge blasts that we are seeing in Damascus, in Aleppo that happened all over the place, they have all been done and orchestrated by the so-called freedom fighters. And very recently, there was a huge blast in Damascus that was very close to the to the Russian embassy, in which school kids even were targeted. Now, there has been a huge number of massacres and explosions done by the FSA and their supporters. And there has not been a single incident in which a massacre has been clearly pinpointed to have been done and orchestrated by the army. And every time they have tried to do this, evidence emerges later on that shows that in fact it was the other side that has done it. The same applies for the building of the Aleppo University. And Al-Nusra is happy to reveal that it's behind all of these things.
Right. All right. Go ahead, Reem. If you have anything to respond to. Sorry.
Yeah, the conversation kind of went all over the place. I just want to go back to a few things that Hassan mentioned when he was saying kind of like be tolerant with Assad. He understands there's corruption. He understands, but he's a reformer. You're setting the bar so low. To mention the internet, to mention cell phones, it's mind-blowing to me. It's like we're talking about freedom, about basic human rights. You know, if you look at Assad as a reformer, you're greatly mistaken in thinking that way. He had more than 11 years to be a true reformer. Having set up on internet, this is not a reformer. This is surface things. We're talking about human rights. We're talking about, you expressing your feelings and your opinions without being tortured. That's for me way more important than having a cell phone or an internet. So I just wanted to go back to those couple points. And then back to your question, Max, about the intervention, people coming into Syria. I'm against any intervention pro-revolution or pro-regime, but the reports that are coming out of Syria by Human Rights Watch, by the UN, it's mainly what's happening in Syria. It's mostly the regime is using the intervention, and it's not the revolution. Although the media is pointing at the revolution probably getting the army, and I'm not denying that they are getting some help from the neighboring borders, but mainly the systematic actually intervention is coming from Russia, from Iran, from Hezbollah to Syria. So to claim that the revolution is actually getting intervention and from the outside world, it's actually a mistake. If you have any report that actually shows that the revolution is actually, or like there's an army that's coming and helping the revolution, please bring it up. Otherwise, the most recent report that Human Rights Watch, that 2013, showed actually there were, fighters from Hezbollah inside Syria. The most recent release of actually the Syrian detainee, there were a release, the FSA, the Free Syrian Army, released Iranian who were captured on the Syrian land. And this is, was on the news that I think even the Syrian state brought it up as, it was an exchange of prisoner. So if you have any report showing otherwise, please bring it up. Otherwise, it's really the regime who is calling for the intervention, not the revolution. And all my actually relative friends, activists who are on the ground and even outside, I mean, the outside is different, but everyone on the ground is against any kind of intervention. The NATO, no one actually having that. They do want, to raise awareness. They want the UN to come in with medical help, with the humanitarian help, but no one is actually asking for any military intervention. We saw it happening before, and we learned our lesson, and we actually against any intervention.
Right. Go ahead, Ghassan.
Well, there have been calls for Russia to stop vetoing a UN resolution that would, in fact, allow intervention in Syria in the same manner that it had allowed intervention in Libya. And I do not for one moment, Reem, believe that it is the Syrian government who is asking Russia to shut up. And if we're going to accept your theory that there has been no intervention at all, then where did all of these weapons come from? Did they materialize from thin air? They just all of a sudden appeared in Syria? Of course, they would have been brought the weapons, the weapons of the rebels. They would have come in from Turkey, primarily from Turkey and Lebanon. Little would have come in from Jordan, very, very little maybe from Iraq, mainly from Turkey and Lebanon. But to say that the revolution, the so-called revolution in Syria, is a people's revolution, is one that has been done by the people of the country, is a massive, massive exaggeration and aberration of the truth. Plus, you said that there has been some Iranians that were showed by the FSA to be captured. Well, this allegation remains to be substantiated. I do not believe it. And even if there are a few Iranians fighting in Syria, they wouldn't be a drop in the ocean in comparison to the tens of thousands of other foreigners fighting on the side of al-Nusra or the FSA. Tens of thousands of them. And the other thing, if we are going to say that, gosh, I lost my point here. I lost what I was going to say next. Never mind.
Okay.
So, intervention, if there is intervention, a major intervention and a smaller intervention, definitely the greater one is the one that's happening on the FSA side. Yeah, I remembered what I was going to say. If a Lebanese citizen, albeit a member of Hezbollah or any other party, or just a citizen, decides to go to Syria and fight with the army, that's not intervention. Because he is a Lebanese. Being Lebanese, it means he is a Syrian and he has the right to go and defend his country. And if I was of right age, I perhaps do it myself. It would not be intervention. It would be rising to the occasion and going there willingly, sacrificing your blood in order to be able to defend your country. This is not intervention.
All right, go ahead, Mary. Do you have any remarks?
Sure, I have a few remarks. One I see in the comments down here that it says, Mary W. says, Mary has called for NATO intervention in Syria. I've never called for NATO intervention in Syria. I don't know where this person gets their information, but it's absolutely wrong. I've called for a no-fly zone in Syria, just as I've called for it in Palestine, as I've thought that, preventing an air force from striking civilian neighborhoods is a good idea. Okay, and then to talk about, to get to the point where Hassan earlier talked about Syria has the right to use or any kind of weapons that it has in its arsenal in its own defense. And my question, of course, and I don't ask him because he was not going to answer, of course, but is to ask anybody that's listening, is that can a country actually defend themselves against their own people? This is something that I find totally unorthodox. A country is supposed to defend themselves from occupiers and from invaders. I don't think that the civilian population or even the militarized population that has grown up out of an uprising against the regime that was attacking them, as Hassan has also conceded earlier in this discussion, I don't think that they have any right to do something as immoral as to bomb their own people. Bombing civilians is a highly immoral act. It's not accepted in any kind of convention, international convention of any sort. In fact, it's a war crime. And I will go further. He talked about Hassan mentioned before that the reason that Syria had made the choice of not going in and liberating their occupied Golan was the fact that they couldn't win a war against Israel, and it was kind of deemed politically convenient to do such an action. Well, Hezbollah has thrown that theory to the ground in 2006. They were able to defeat the IDF in that occasion, and I will add to that. I don't know if Hassan is aware, but back in 2008, I was one of the persons on the committee for the international. The International Tribunal of War Crimes, which took place in Brussels, and it was for the to deliberate about the 2006 war in southern. I'll just take 1 minute to say this. To deliberate about the 2006 war in southern Lebanon, and as a matter of fact, three points were decided by a panel of 5 judges from all 5 continents, and they had judged that not only had what been done was crimes against humanity, but there were also war crimes and a genocide. And the definition of genocide that they had used was the definition from all of the international conventions, and this is exactly what Assad is doing to his own people, attacking people on the basis of their political beliefs or their position against a political regime. So the point that Assad has some kind of right to use all of this heavy weaponry, it absolutely does not stand any ground.
Okay, Ghassan, go ahead and respond, and then.
Mary always allows herself to break all rules and regulations, put words into my mouth, and go overtime and interrupt me. So I may need to go also a little bit overtime to address the issues that she has raised.
2 interventions for each one of ours.
Here you go.
Right.
But it is funny that she understands that Hezbollah has been able to land a big blow on Israel, a big victory in 2006, and does not acknowledge who was the driving force behind the victory, and that if it wasn't for Syria, that victory would not have been possible. And the second important thing, she keeps talking about bombing civilians and genocide and stuff like that.
Yes.
And she conveniently ignores the mounting evidence that from day one, the fighters, the so-called rebels in Syria, have been using the population as a human shield. They will deliberately and put themselves, station themselves in between highly populated areas and start shooting at the army. And what the army tries to do is to push them away. And of course, it has all the right to use any weaponry in its arsenal to do that. Now, does this mean that the Syrian army is deliberately trying to kill civilians, as Mary is trying to portray? This is quite the contrary, exactly the opposite. If the Syrian army was diligent about killing civilians, it could have destroyed the entire population by now. There are pockets in which those terrorists put themselves in order to make it look very, very bad for the army, and the army will have to fight them. It has absolutely no choice, no other choice at all. And talking about war crime tribunals, whether they're in Brussels or The Hague or any of these places, look, we know damn well by now, we should know what all international committees mean. We should know what the United Nations and the Security Council all mean. This is the Council of the Victims of World War II. We are still living in the heritage of the victims of World War II. They decide the politics of the world, and Mary, as a so-called activist, should know and understand all of this. She should be the first one to understand the facade between those phony organizations that give themselves a very illustrious outlook just to make them look good. But deep down inside, they're full of corruption, full of bias, and all they have been doing for the last 50 years in the region is support Israel and very, very covertly condone everything that Israel is doing in way of suppressing the Palestinian people and their right of return and the right of taking back their land. You, Mary, should be the first person to understand that. So don't, on one hand, say something against a side of politics, and then on the other hand, go and support it. Make up your mind, where do you stand? You have no idea. Honestly, you don't. You're very politically naive, extremely naive.
Okay, so, I mean, Mary, Reem, Mary, I don't know if you want to, like, take 30 seconds to respond, and Reem, if you want to relinquish 30 seconds to Mary to respond, but it's totally...
No, go ahead, Reem. All I can do is laugh.
I'll respond on
There's
your
no
behalf,
response.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, there is so many points, but it's interesting how Wassan keeps saying, I think I literally wrote down what he said, million people coming into Syria, and then he mentioned mountain of evidence. It's just, this, generalizing. I don't know where you're getting mountain of evidence that the FSA are hiding between the people, between civilians, and I don't know where you're getting millions of people who are coming into Syria to work, to join the FSA. Those are just, those are big numbers. You have to have evidence of those. But I would direct you to go to the Human Rights Watch website, pull their 2013 report, and see what they actually saw on the ground in Syria. What they saw is the FSA. And you mentioned where are they getting their weapons from? I'll tell you, actually, I was in a fundraising event recently, and we had on Skype one of the FSA leaders, and I am one, actually, of the people who are skeptical about the FSA, because I wanted this revolution to stay peaceful, because I knew the regime will be happy if it turns into armed revolution. But I cannot be judgmental of somebody who lost a mother or a father or a child and tell him, don't carry a weapon and defend yourself. But I was curious to know their point, and we asked them this question: where are you getting your weapons from? How are you? And they said, first source is really the defectors, the people who were with the regime and just couldn't take it anymore and defected. There's plenty of these people until this day. When people actually talked about the Assad military, I am kind of sympathizing with them, because my dad was in the military, and I know a lot of them disapprove, but because of the brutal reaction that the Assad would do if you actually defect, they hesitate. So there are plenty of people who currently are with the Assad military, and they're actually not happy with what's happening. Second source is they actually buy it from the regime military, because there are a lot of people who are taking advantage of this mess, and they don't care. If you have money, I'll give you a weapon. Who cares who are you going to shoot? So it is a mess, and that's where actually these are the two, according to FSA leader, those are the two main resources that they're getting the weapons from. They said there is very minimal weapons coming through Turkey, but it's not even like whatever the smuggler can give them, but it's nothing like heavy weapon or anything that's heavier weapon. They're actually getting it from the defectors, the people who are defected because they don't want to kill their brothers or sisters. And then I still don't really understand how could you deny that the Meg flying in Syria's air bombed the university. There were nobody hiding in Aleppo University when they bombed it. And if you cannot believe that actually that was by the regime, then we have way bigger issue to discuss here than you not acknowledging that the regime is actually bombing their own people. They don't care if you mentioned like, oh, because the FSA is actually hiding between the people. Sometimes they don't care about that, and you are so mistaken. I know how the regime operates. They don't care. They came once in my university, the Massachusetts University, took a professor. We're talking about a professor who should be a role model. This is mukhabarat we're talking. They actually beat him up in the middle of the university. Do you really, these kind of people, care if they killed a civilian or if they hurt somebody's feeling or if they hurt a child?
Right.
Absolutely not.
Right.
They bombed Aleppo University. It was a man who bombed that university.
Right. Go ahead, Ghassan.
Well, Reem, you asked me to provide evidence. Well, I invite you in our group. It's called the Syrian Revolution, the Untold Story. We have a group of professional people there and advocates of the Syrian people, the real Syrian people who are trying to expose the truth. We have highly professional journalists, people from all walks of life, explaining little details and lies that have been perpetrated by the FSA and its supporters. So if you want to see evidence, I cannot show it to you here. But I invite you to join that group and see how a lot of that myth has been dispelled. And then you talk about defection. You talk about defections of the Syrian army, and this is how allegedly you are saying the rebels are getting their weapons. I fully, 100% disagree, and quite honestly, with all due respect, I find it quite laughable. If there was indeed any kind of thing as defection, massive defection, then the most vulnerable one, or the ones who can do it most safely, would be the diplomats. We had not seen one single Syrian diplomatic mission that has defected against the government, even though they have been offered millions and millions of bribes. They don't do it. Why? Because they support the government. Allow me to finish. I allow everyone to speak.
Yeah, Mary.
Mary. When you say something
let us look at the people on. Are you aware? Reem, I do not interrupt anyone, and I don't really at all appreciate being interrupted.
Guys, let him finish.
I don't interrupt anyone.
Let him finish
and
his.
Let us not forget, if we want to look at the allies of the so-called revolution, that Israel had opened its gates for the wounded. Are you aware of the fact that wounded FSA fighters are going to Israel to get treated there in Israeli hospitals? Are you aware of that? Does this make you proud? As a Syrian, do you feel proud of that? Or are you at all aware of it to begin with? So there is no defection, there is no massive defection. And the evidence, I can show you the evidence. You're prepared to visit our website and look at all of those dispelled myths. And just be reminded that your friends or the people that you're supporting, that side of the politics, are actually friends with Israel and they're getting treatment in Israel. And that's a great badge of honor, I suppose, to the FSA and its support. And by the way, if the rebels get their way, Reem, you're going to have to wear a scarf when you go back to Syria next time.
I will start my own revolution at that point.
Okay, so guys, we've been speaking for over an hour at this point. I don't know if you guys want to continue, but if you want to, it's fine. Otherwise, if you guys want to maybe make like closing remarks sort of thing, and we've been taking the professional route with this timer, so maybe you want to even take it a step further. And do you guys want to continue speaking, or you think we can close it up and maybe Reem, why don't you, if you want to direct any statements towards what you think needs to happen going forward, that would be great. I'm sure people listening, which is a substantial number of people, you have like over 20 people in the room, would want to hear what you think has to happen next.
Yes, I would love to continue the conversation, but I will have to jump out, so I would just try to close it. I'm not saying the revolution is perfect, but we are in a situation where we're demanding our freedom. If an Islam party is gonna come after that and they're gonna force me to wear a scarf, I will fight them as well. So why do we have to settle for somebody like Assad and say, oh, but maybe an alternative will be worse? This is just an argument that I can't actually believe people at this time making it. Like, oh, you have to agree that your mother could be raped or your brother could be tortured because you never know what's gonna come next. So we started this revolution to obtain our freedom, and we will get our freedom. We don't need any help from outside, medical help and humanitarian help, of course, but military support, we are not expecting that, and the Syrian people will rise. And this is just history repeats itself. I mean, dictators will not last. I would love to go in Assad's brain and see how he's functioning. How could he believe he actually can sustain this situation? People rose against him, and the end is going to be he's going to have to step down, and the people are going to continue it, and it's not going to be better. The country's not going to be better in a couple of years. Maybe it's going to take 10 years, but is the alternative just sit down and accept what's happening? No.
Ghassan, do you want to, respond with any closing remarks and, anything, regarding solutions going forward?
Okay, can I give the floor to Mary, if you don't mind? So, respond as a final response to both of us, if that's okay.
Okay, go, Mary, if you want to, take a swing at it, go ahead.
Sure. Sure, no problem. For me, I think the basic issue is one of denial. Someone can be in denial and deny what is inside in front of their. Do you hear me, Max? You're making strange faces.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
It's okay.
I think that someone can be in denial of what's actually happening because they prefer it to be different than what it is. I kind of detect, and not only in these conversations, so in previous conversations that Hassan, I've listened to the one I've had with him, and then of course the ones one or two that he's had with other people, and basically he believes that the Assad, the government there is keeping in place secularism, and as Assad leaves, all of a sudden the women will be forced to be wearing hijab, and it will be a Sharia law that comes in place, and it's going to be terrible because the Christians are going to feel excluded and discriminated against, and the Alawis the same situation, and this kind of in these it wasn't brought up in this conversation, but it was in other conversations, and in another conversation that he had, he mentioned something about the positive aspects of a benevolent dictatorship, and I can't think of any positive aspect of any kind of dictatorship, but of course, if this is the way that he reasons, it wouldn't be such a far stretch for him to even do as he is doing in this conversation, to put forward that there's actually something more important than the Syrian people. That would be keeping in place this regime, and the cost of that is for the regime in power to use its weapons, which are actually the weapons of the people being killed, by the way, as well, to use these weapons against the people. And I insist that if we want to bring everything down, we want to wipe out all the ideology and the history and all of these things, but bring it to a level that every human being can understand, it's the question of morality. Is it moral to bomb civilians? Is it moral to create a refugee problem of this dimension? Is it moral to prevent humanitarian aid from entering when people are in such desperate need? Is it moral to bomb bread lines? Is it moral to keep children away from schools? None of this is moral. This is all very immoral. And the people who don't have the power to change this, to make this happen. Only the one that has the powers has got the power to do this. So any kind of power he has, it's abusive in every sense of the word abusive. Abusive, that is an abuse, and it's also not legitimate, because we're talking about when you've got a people that does not any longer want to be subjected to a certain kind of situation, such as not only the oppression in the war, but the oppression before the war. It is a legitimate human right for them to respond and to rebel. And in order to do this, they have decided that this is worth it, to be subjected to arbitrary detainment, to death, to being in exile, and every other kind of your dog.
Sorry.
It's okay. I've got one too. But every other kind of negative thing against human nature and human rights. You can't accept that this goes on and still consider yourself a moral person.
Ghassan, are you there? Yes, you must have a timer in your dog to tell you that it's time to finish it. It starts barking. Denial is a big thing, Mary, sadly. But you're the one who is in denial of the actual agenda of the revolutionists in Syria. They are the ones who kill and chant Allahu Akbar. They are the ones who are indeed trying to kill Christians and send Alawites to the grave. I'm not making it up. It's been their slogans. I can show this to you. I'm not making it up. This is Islamophobia. It's truth. It's facts. And dictators will not last, Reem? Of course they will not last. And you say that people have risen against Bashar? Yes, some did. But I assure you that more have risen to support him. And this is why he's still standing. And at the end of the day, as I have said many times before on this forum, this whole thing is not about the person of Bashar. This is about the sovereignty and independence of Syria. Because there are two camps in the Arab world. Those who have sold themselves, sold their heart and soul to Israel and to the plots of the West, and are ready to do anything just to secure their positions on their throne. And those, a very, very tiny minority, I beg your pardon, who refuses this, who stands up proud and firm and say, no, we will not accept that. And Syria is the only country standing that supports and stands for that view. And this is what the whole thing is about. There are many other little details. There's a lot of wrong things that have been done and committed here and there. I am not denying. I'm not discussing details, not for the sake of trying to avoid them or evade them, but simply because, as I said before, for every argument there is a counter argument. And this is why I go back to the main issue. What is the main issue here? What is at stake? What is at stake is the freedom and independence of Syria. We either stand up or we allow the West, through its perpetrators, to do what they want and let Israel run free. That's what it's all about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you so much for participating. I think our audience members really enjoyed it. They've been submitting a ton of comments, and more so than I can even read through. So Let's definitely be in touch, and thank you so much for your help. I mean, as usual, you guys were awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Max.
Thanks, Mary.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Goodbye.